Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mailbox for the 6th of August 2012. My name is TotalBiscuit, bringing you your daily dose of community interaction, gaming discussion, and all that good stuff. You can email in mailbox at cynicalbrit.com. That's mailbox at cynicalbrit.com with topics for future shows. The game in the background is Awesome Noughts. I want to alternate between Awesome Noughts and I think a little bit of Kung Fu Strike over the next few days, because hey, why not? What better reason is there, quite frankly? First email comes in here from Ben that says, I was wondering what your thoughts are regarding single player versus co-op. Although playing co-op with my friends has always resulted in a superior game experience, I tend to shy away from co-op games in favour of single player. This is because I find it far too difficult to find people to play with me. For example, in a game like Orcs Must Die 2, one of many games you've reviewed and said it would only really be fun with another person. I never said that, by the way. I just want to point that out. I'd have to find a friend who likes that kind of game, convince him to buy it, and find a time that works for both of us to be able to play it. It seems the rate at which I like to play games is normally very different as well, and I tend to find myself stalking Skype for that person to get on, just to hear, nah, I'd like to play a different game. Because of these reasons, I find myself only playing a co-op game only if I know all my friends are already playing it, buying big-budget games like Call of Duty, or games that offer a great single-player and co-op experience. All of these reasons are not my friend's fault, obviously, and it just makes me wonder if this affects more people than just myself. Do you think the market for really good co-op games is hurt more or less by being co-op only, and do you think co-op only games tend to sell less than single-player only games? Well, I think that any game that limits the way that you play is inherently going to do less successfully than a game that allows you to do pretty much anything. That said, the problem with allowing that is that you more often than not dilute each experience. I've said many times before that I would actually prefer some games to just do away with single player or do away with multiplayer if it's just kind of a tacked-on feel. And that is more often than not the case. You've got single players that are 3 hours long that really aren't all that interesting. You know, I would be okay with a 3-hour single player if it was 3 hours of good single player action, but more often than not it's scripted and nonsensical and I'm not really a fan of it. There are also plenty of examples of tacked on multiplayer modes, like for instance the original Darkness. Did you even know that had multiplayer? It did, but it was a complete waste of space and time. If a game is designed with co-op in mind, then I feel that it shouldn't necessarily offer a single-player experience, even though it makes sense from a consumer choice standpoint. You buy the game, and it's like, well, I don't really want to play co-op, so I'd prefer to play single-player, but the single-player may be an unfair representation of how the game actually plays out. Now, I just want to point out I never said that Orcs Must Die 2 is only fun in co-op. Quite the opposite. The original Orcs Must Die was very fun in single-player, but it is more fun in co-op with Orcs Must Die 2. I would imagine that Orcs Must Die 2 is also absolutely fine in single-player. Indeed, I played a few levels of it, and since it's pretty much identical to the original, I don't see the problem. But here's the thing. There are times when a game is designed with co-op in mind and should just be a co-op experience. Sometimes that also means that they have to cut the price down because you limit the ways in which your player base can actually enjoy the game. And sometimes, as a result, you limit its shelf life. Some people want to play single player, they don't have the option to do that because perhaps the developers felt that this was designed to be experienced in co-op and that a single player simply wouldn't work. I mean, there are not that many games whereby a single player version wouldn't work, but there are a lot of games where the single-player version is just inferior. Maybe the AI sucks. Maybe it just doesn't work properly without another person helping you. And think about it for a second. The co-op mode of Portal 2 would not have worked without a second player. Could you do that with AI? Not really. Most of the point of that mode is to actually figure out the puzzles between the two of you. Either the AI guy's going to be brain dead and maybe wait for you to trigger the puzzle itself by figuring out the right answer, then he moves, or he figures out the puzzle for you and completely defeats the point of the exercise. Now, in the case of Portal 2, it can be argued that the co-op mode did not detract from the single player, although some people will turn around and say, well, actually it kind of did, because if the co-op mode wasn't there, then the single player would have been longer, it would have had more development time put into it. It's a pretty difficult argument to make one way or the other, isn't it? Now, when it comes down to whether or not co-op focused games sell less, well, I don't think so. The Army of Two games did very, very well, and they are very much focused on co-op. In fact, if you're not playing it in co-op, with the single player and the bot as your teammate, I feel that that game is notably less fun. I wouldn't say that they did stellar by any stretch of the imagination, but the sales figures for both Army of Two and 40th Day are pretty damn good, and there's a third game coming out, so it can't have been doing that badly. EA would have killed it otherwise. I think the problem with co-op games as well is that you've really got to actually play it with a friend and not a random on the internet. I don't feel that it's that enjoyable to do that. You can matchmake and get another teammate, but you have no idea who this guy's going to end up being. Does he even talk on his microphone? Does he have a really loud, deafening microphone? Does he even speak your language? Does he want to cooperate, or does he just want to screw around? Because you become so dependent on your co-op partner, it's very difficult to justify jumping into a co-op game with someone you've never met or indeed ever spoken to before. Think about the problems that League of Legends has when you go into solo ranked. You get grouped with 4 other guys who you don't know, but your success is reliant upon them. You can't win a game on your own unless, of course, you hotshot GG, and even then, if your team is feeding horribly, then you could still lose. Co-op games, that's amped up to 11, because essentially half of your fighting force is the other guy. If he sucks, you're not getting anywhere. I do think, though, without question, that being just a co-op game does limit your market inherently. What you're essentially saying is this is a multiplayer-only title. Now, the question is, which is more popular, multiplayer co-op only or multiplayer competitive only? I can't answer that, honestly. I don't see any research to indicate one way or the other. I mean, you can look at the success of Call of Duty, but at the end of the day, that's got all 3 of those modes in it. There is a co-op mode, there is a competitive mode, and there is a single player. Gears of War, competitive, co-op, single player. In fact, I think the only thing you can draw from that, and even then, bearing in mind correlation is not the same as causation, so you can't really argue that offering all 3 experiences raises the number of sales you get. Those games sell a lot of copies because they have very high-profile franchises. There are a large number of reasons as to why they're high-profile. It's not just because they offer all 3 of those experiences. This email comes in from Thor that says, I have always been a fan of the original Borderlands and its DLCs. Really? Always? Before they came out? Impressive. And played it for many, many hours. When I heard that there would be a new Borderlands coming out, I was more than excited. After I saw the trailer, this excitement became even bigger. Recently, I saw the pre-order deal for Borderlands 2 on Steam, and I have to say that I was more than shocked. For those who don't know, the pre-order pack contains better starting weapons, an item for an improved chance of finding rare stuff, a key for some chests that can't be opened otherwise, and an all-new character class. I really got in a rage because of this deal. The people that pre-ordered get like a VIP status over those who will buy the game on release by offering much more better content in the pre-order edition. What are your thoughts on this? Alright, so I think that you're overreacting. And the reason you're overreacting is that, for the most part, this stuff is pretty damn fair. Okay, let's go down the list. Gearbox Gold Gun Pack, a package of unique Gearbox golden guns to help you start your journey on Pandora. Alright, why on earth would I want that? This is a question that I have to keep asking whenever I see these pre-order bonuses. Why would I want to skip parts of the progression curve? That's half the fun of games like this. Starting off with a terrible gun and then scavenging for new guns and getting cool item drops is great fun. If these golden guns are so good that for the next 4 or 5 hours no weapon drop's going to be useful to me, then why the hell would I want to use them? It's insanity, really. It was the same as when I was playing through Dawn of War 2 and I got pre-order bonuses for that, and the items were so good that I couldn't replace them for ages. So like, what? Half of the fun is me getting this new stuff. It's insanity. I think that if I do end up pre-ordering this thing, which I might do, and I'll tell you why later on, I just won't use these golden guns. It's a stupid, stupid idea. Now, the argument could be put forth that these golden guns should not have been created because it's taking away development time. Well, as far as I'm concerned, this game has a random gun generator, so cooking up 4 or 5 new guns and slapping a gold skin on them probably took about 30 minutes, so I'm not overly worried about what some intern did in his lunch break and then created a pre-order bonus from. The golden key unlock a rare item in the mysterious Sanctuary loot chest. So I've done a little bit of research on this, and it is kind of mysterious. Needless to say, they don't really want to tell you what's in it, but it will be a rare item of some description. They just don't tell you what. There is also the assumption, I believe, that you'll only be able to open this thing once. Sanctuary is a town within the game. One assumes it's not at the start, because, once again, that will be kind of pointless. Alright, so I've got the golden guns and this other gun, which is probably better. Alright, just throw them away then. Well, again, I don't really have a huge problem with this. The issue that I've got is that it's in your face. Or is it? I mean, we don't know this, do we? It was obnoxious to see the DLC salesman in the camp in Dragon Age. That was a pretty bad idea, let's be honest. But with this chest, I don't even know where this thing is. How far into the game is Sanctuary? Is it just a normal, regular chest? Does it say, oh my god, buy me, you must have me? Or does it just look like part of the scenery? Once again, it's one gun in a game where there are so many generated guns that you could replace this thing within about 5 minutes. So I don't have a huge problem with that either. Once again, though, is this making the game easier? If it is, I don't want any part of it. Vault Hunter's Relic. Play solo or team up with friends and boost your gear hunting fortune with the Vault Hunter's Relic. Well, this I can see why you've got a complaint, because you're giving a bonus, you're giving an advantage to people that pre-order this thing. Only it's a completely co-op game, has no competitive element of any description whatsoever, so I have to wonder what advantage you are giving. In Borderlands 1, a bunch of people cheated in order to get better guns. Did it affect anyone? Not really. Last I checked, and please, veteran Borderlands players, correct me if I'm wrong here, there wasn't much of a trading market for weapons in Borderlands. It was very hard to store stuff. You only got a stash if you purchased the second DLC, which I believe was actually the worst. And there was no proper trading interface of any sort. The game just wasn't based around trading items and things like that. It was just based on playing it with a few friends, killing some stuff, getting some good items on your own. Does a boost in item drop really make a difference? Bear in mind, this is not Diablo 3. You can't sell these items. The chances are you're going to be able to cheat just like you were able to in Borderlands 1 in order to create custom guns. So, once again, what is the problem here? And this is the most controversial one, the new character class. The thing is, though, that people don't really understand this. This character class hasn't been made yet. What they're doing is giving you the first DLC for free when it's made. So, Borderlands 2 has already gone gold. This character class is not available. It's not a launch DLC. It's not a day one. They're not cutting a part of the game out. This is something they're making later. So, is that a problem? Well, no, actually, that's a very nice thing to do for those who take the risk and pre-order. More often than not, pre-order bonuses kind of suck. Getting a new character class when it comes out, whereas everyone else will have to pay for it, that's a good deal. That's actually fair. That would encourage people to pre-order, and indeed it has. It's been having some success over on Steam by the looks of it. So, overall, I think while the whole golden gun thing and golden key is pretty stupid because I don't really want extra advantages that make the game easier and break the progression curve for me, because in games like that, the progression curve is most of the fun for me as a player, I don't honestly see a problem with it. I think it's pretty damn reasonable. I'd have a problem with it if there were exclusive enemies, exclusive areas, quests, content that actually takes a while to put together. Reskinned, randomly generated guns, and a statistical bonus for loot? Meh. I think it's important that we be balanced in our criticisms of stuff like this, and we focus on stuff that is genuinely cutting parts of the game out in order to sell later on. Borderlands 2 does not seem to fall into that trap. This one comes in from Chris that says, a few weeks back, Valve announced that they were going to start developing Steam to work on Linux in order to push the OS to a more mainstream use. Last week, the company released a bunch of benchmark tests that were held to compare the performance of their source engine between Windows 7 and Linux's Ubuntu 12 on a high-end gaming rig which tested Left 4 Dead 2. The results were a performance of 270 FPS on Windows and 315 FPS on Linux after a bit of tweaking. While the difference may not seem much on that high of a level, I would think that that can make a big difference on mid or lower spec machines, and while I have very limited knowledge about Linux, I know that Valve used 32-bit Ubuntu, yet 64-bit Windows 7, so I would think 64-bit can get even better performance depending on the game. With the results of this performance test and the lack of popularity of the upcoming Windows 8, do you think that Linux can become the new standard OS when it comes to PC gaming? With this question, you've got to address two things. One, whether or not gamers want to move to Linux, and two, why this is happening to begin with. This is something your question didn't actually mention. The reason that Valve are pushing Linux as an alternative is because they're worried about Windows 8. The reason they're worried about Windows 8 is that Windows 8 is very much Apple style. This is a Windows that has stores for everything built in from the get-go. It's a Windows whereby when you log in as a gamer, your credit card details are stored the first time that you go there, and it's all about selling you stuff, and taking a cut, of course. Microsoft has had a look at the way Apple's done it. Apple has completely locked down their iOS platforms, and as a result is able to take 30% of every sale of everything, and there's no other way to buy software for an iOS device. What a wonderful thing to make tons of money. The problem with Windows up to this point, from Microsoft's perspective, is that once it's sold, there's not really a huge amount they can do to monetize it any further. Apple's got it made. You buy an iPad for a fairly hefty price, then every single app that you ever buy with your iPad also gives money to Apple. You are locked into them for life, unless of course you jailbreak your system, and doing that has considerable risks. Now, I had to go digging to find why exactly people don't like the look of Windows 8, because Gabe Newell's interview doesn't explain that. It just said it's going to be a catastrophe, it's going to be a problem for high-end developers and OEMs. Notch also weighed in on this and said that if Microsoft decides to lock down Windows 8, it would be very bad for indie games and competition in general. But what does all of that really mean from a technical standpoint? What do they mean about locking it down? Well, I haven't found any evidence that they're going to lock the entire thing down yet, but what they do seem to be doing is aggressively pushing their store, their apps, their bloody well everything, which is interesting considering years ago they tried to do the same thing with Internet Explorer and Messenger and got slapped about a bit by the European courts. There are some fairly sinister things going on, though. The Windows Store, for instance. If you want to be listed on the Windows Store, your app has got to start in 2 seconds or less. No, seriously, it actually does. And that makes me think, hang on a second, this is stacking the deck against high-end games. High-end games don't launch that quickly. It's got to have something called a snapped view, so it's got to be playable while taking up 1/3 or 2/3 of the desktop. Once again, not really a useful thing for high-end games. Your app must not contain content that encourages, facilitates, or glamorizes extreme or gratuitous violence, human rights violations, or the creation or use of weapons against a person or animal in the real world. It's obvious what that's intended to stop, but it could also be used to censor high-end games. Microsoft are also aggressively pushing what's called Windows Runtime, which is a development environment. Came out last year, and if you want to be on the Windows Store, you have to package with the Runtime app. Now, the problem with that is that it is built for Windows 8. It is built for the Metro interface, which in turn was also built for touch. In fact, a lot of the interface for Windows 8 seems to be designed with touchscreens and tablets in mind, so it's not even aimed at our current operating environment, whereby we use a keyboard and mouse to play high-end games and use high-end applications. It is definitely concerning that Microsoft are attempting to shove the market into a different area that they can make more money out of. Bear in mind, this of course restricts future development. If they decide that they don't want Windows 8 to support high-end gaming, then they will not provide the necessary tools to make it work well on a high-end level. They will, of course, also not support Windows 7 development anymore and cause a whole bunch of problems for people trying to make really good PC games. I mean, hell, think about it. Microsoft's already got one platform that directly competes with PC gaming, the Xbox. They would prefer people play games on the Xbox. They make more money that way. It's a more controlled, closed environment. And now they're developing a second piece of hardware to compete with it, which is, of course, the Surface, which is what Windows 8 is designed for. So Microsoft are making a tablet to compete with PCs, and they've got a console, and they're making another console to compete with PCs. I mean, hell, Windows 8 has an Xbox companion. It allows you to buy Xbox games, then download them remotely to your Xbox. And in the current version of the Xbox Store, you can buy high-end PC games, but they're buried under menus upon menus upon menus. It seems like it's deliberately making it difficult in order to purchase high-end PC titles. Now, of course, on the flip side, all of this sounds really bad, but if you can disable it, then it's not really a big deal, is it? It's not like they're stopping Steam from running. I think this is more of a case of Valve getting very worried about what could happen later down the line that could restrict their market share and what Windows 8 could do to gaming. I think Microsoft would be very happy if PC gaming wasn't possible, because they would prefer people play on their new tablet, they'd prefer people play on their Xbox, where they can take a bigger share of the profit. As for me and your question about whether or not I would use Linux, it comes down, and I think this is the case with many gamers, it comes down to a very, very simple point. The reason we don't use Linux is because it's too difficult to get games to run on it. And this is exactly what Gabe Newell has said as well. I would switch to Linux in a heartbeat if it would run easily and efficiently all of the programs and games that I currently use. Right now, it will not, which is the reason I do not use Linux. I have no love for Microsoft or Windows. I merely use the operating system that allows me to play the games that I want and use the applications that I want. If Valve wants to push Linux, then I'm all for that. That is a good thing to do. You can see their reason to do this. It's beneficial to them from a business standpoint, but at the end of the day, it is beneficial to us as consumers that we have competition within the operating system space. Alright folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the Mailbox. I'll see you next time.
kill.